The discourse. First of all, what is the meaning of the word discourse? A discourse is a verbal interaction among people. In our everyday lives, discourse is always present because while communicating with someone or having some topic, even when we are writing, we are participating in a discourse. A good example of a discourse is what is currently happening right now. While I am discussing to you about this topic, I am participating in a discourse. So everyone, ang discourse is mahitabo ni siya adlaw sa atong kinabuhi. Kay magipagstorya man jud ta adlaw-adlaw bisag kinsa, we are participating in a discourse. Even though nagsuwat ra ta, nagipag-share sa atong silingan, nakipag-chat sa atong mga friends, or nagipagstorya sa atong mama, that is considered as a discourse. Another examples of a discourse is a professor discussing to his students, a student writing some notes, and your mother talking about the news in the neighborhood. Prof, why did you included the sentence of a student writing some notes nga nagsuwat naman ni siya, wala man ni siya nagstorya? Okay, I included it because it is a transfer of information that requires words to be written down. Everyone, you must be familiar with the sentence, read with your eyes, not with your mouth. I know, kadong damuanay kay pero medyo ning isulti sa inyong teacher bas kay para hilom ra mo. And then your teacher will ask you to summarize your story. So, imo dyan ang hinumduman balik kung unsa to pagkahitabo ang story niya. Kung unsa gyud mo mahinumduman, imo gyud tong isuwat even though dili nimo masulti ang imuhang gisummarize by voice, imo gyud po nang masulti by words kay imo man nang gisummarize ni imuha man nang gi-rewrite sa paper. Discourse is derived from the Latin prefix dis meaning or away, and its root word courier meaning to run. Therefore, discourse translates to run away and refers to the way that the conversations flow, if it's rude, happy, exciting, frightening, intense, and more. So, as long as you want to communicate with others and either you express it through spoken words or written, it is still considered that you are participating in a discourse. There are four primary purposes a discourse has. It is to persuade, to inform, to discover of one's own need, and to create. If the discourse have four primary purposes, it also have four types of discourses. It is classified into description, narration, exposition, and argumentative. And now, let us know their meanings and their examples. The first one is description. A description discourse can help the audience to visualize an item or a subject by relying on the five senses, which is the sense of sight, taste, hearing, smell, and touch. Its purpose is to depict and explain the topic by the way things look, sound, taste, smell, and feel. Description helps the reader to visualize the characters, settings, and actions that have noun and pronouns. It also helps us to establish the mood and the atmosphere. Here are some examples. The apple is sweet. I heard her singing the song. It's Anna that I saw in the store the other day. Angel's skin is soft. And I smelled something stinky in the corridor. Narration. Narration discourse is the second type of discourse. Its main goal is to tell a story and to make the audience feel differently about a certain topic. This kind of communication usually appeals on the audience's humanity, often by telling an experience or emotion that the audience can relate. It can also make you feel empathy and relatable about the story. Some examples of this are novels, short stories, and plays, including Shakespeare's tragedy story of Romeo and Juliet. Exposition. Exposition is the third type of discourse. Exposition is used to inform the audience about a particular topic. It is used to convey background information to the audience in a neutral way. Exposition is neutral in language and tone to avoid persuading or steering emotion on the reader. Exposition is the third type of our discourse. So everyone, mao ni ang ikatulo na tong type sa discourse. It helps us to know some background information in a certain topic, and it gives a background information in a neutral way. So When we say neutral way, it means pantay raw kay gipaboran na ng duha. Let's say, for example, you are given a task to give a background information about two theories. Nanghata kag background information na nila, pero equal ra sila, way palabaw, like mas maayo na nga theory ha, mas kana yung pilion, inani, dili na siya. Kaya exposition is maghatag mo na siya og background sa two theories or two topics nga equal ra gid siya, baway gilabawan na nila, wa kay gipaboran na nila. Like kung unsa ang gigawas nga result sa imong research, mabati man na or manindot, mao gid na imong ihatag nga information sa mga tao para likayan ang ka-excitement nila kung mas gipalabuan nimo ang usa kaysa sa usa, kay dapat equal ra man gid na siya. Exposition only provides facts and information. In other words, it means to present an idea or relevant discussions that help explain or analyze information in the two topics or their backgrounds in an equal way. Some examples of this is explanation of cultural norms, explanation of the history, and explanation of how the things are made. Now, let us know the meaning of argumentative discourse, the last and the fourth type of discourse. Argumentative discourse is a specific kind of communication, but one that is often broadly defined. This type of discourse is defined as the social or public use of written or spoken language, or in other words, communication between two or more parties. The aim of this discourse is to convince or persuade the audience or reader about an idea or statement. Some examples of argumentative discourse are lectures, essays, and public speech. And now, everyone, for our last and fourth type of discourse, the argumentative discourse. It is a specific kind of discourse, but this is often broadly defined, like it is the missing piece or it can cover the missing part of the story so that we can understand it and it can be completed. It also defined as social or public use of written or spoken, that's in other words, it's a communication between two or more people, like for example, a politician's public speech. This kind of discourse aims to convince or persuade the reader or listener about their idea or statement that they show. To achieve this kind of argumentative discourse, they rely on evidence and logic. Lectures, essays, and speech are examples of argumentative discourse. And now, class, let us know the other discourse. Literary discourse. First of all, we should know what is the meaning of literary discourse. Literary discourse refers to a presentation of thought through language. Discursive language typically contains long, detailed sentences that address a specific subject in a formal way. In other words, literary discourse means speech or writing that normally have long sentences which deals or address someone formally. There are 5 features of literary discourse. It is fictionality, poeticity, inquisitoriality, poet license, and contemplation. It is not claimed that every text that is classified as literary necessarily contains all 5 features, but a vast majority of them do. So we're going to discuss its 5 features, which are the fictionality, poeticity, inquisitoriality, poet license, and contemplation. Fictionality, the category of literature, drama, film, or other creative work whose content is imagined and is not necessarily based on fact. In short, this is just something invented by our imagination, specifically imaginary and just invented stories that does not exist in the real world. Examples are Harry Potter's movies, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and my favorite one, BFG, short for Big Friendly Giant. Poeticity. Poeticity is a quality of discourse language used in general. Verbal signs such as transmission of messages or signals through eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, postures, and the distance between two people functions poetically or relates to poetry. A verbal process of communication simply means a process of communication that activate non-verbal ones which communicating through your voice. Simply explains that if the non-verbal activities is more used over the verbal, a balance is achieved. Next is inquisitoriality. It is an imprisonment due to writings, also known as speech crime. This refers to the official persecution of intellectuals in the writing. Speech crime is a certain kind of speech that are criminalized by law. Criminal speech is a direct preemptive restriction on a freedom of speech. 1. We all know that each one of us has our own freedom of speech that let us do or say whatever we want. But if we abuse our freedom of speech, especially when we are getting offensive to society, like doing slander, pornography, fighting word or curse words, copyright violation, and more. In other words, inquisitoriality or speech crime refers to a restriction of our own freedom of speech if we overstep or abuse our own rights. Poetic license. Poetic license means when people depart from truth and create a more attractive story or poem using its language. It breaks the rule of language, style, and they change the facts in order to create a particular effect to the reader or listener. It can occur in all forms of literature and poetry. However, it is considered a bad form of non-fiction works, which is to tell the truth. They permitted a little lie for the sake of improving the story or poem. And now everyone, the last but not the least, the fifth feature of literary discourse and also the last one, contemplation. Etymologically, the word contemplation derives from the templum, which signified the space marked out by a seer, with his divining rod as a location for observation. Contemplation is a type of knowledge that is accompanied by delight and a certain degree of admiration for the object contemplated. Contemplation is not the study of truth by discursive reasoning, but a consideration and delight in truth already grasped, not directed to the practical life of action, but a speculative, disinterested, and delighted gaze upon truth itself. In short, contemplation is a long observation that is accompanied by delight and a certain degree of admiration about an object. Contemplation is a consideration of delight and truth that is already in hand or already known by its long observation. It does not directly mean to the practical life or action, but just a speculation, an interested and delighted gaze upon the truth itself. In other words, contemplation is a delighted gaze that wants the truth itself after observing. Like for example, you have seen and observed an object and you got curious not by its speculative answers, but the truth itself. There are three types of literary discourse. It's transactional, poetic, and expressive. Transactional discourse. Transactional discourse is used to propel something into action, such as advertising, motivating a customer to buy, or showing a customer how to use a product via a manual. It lays out a clear action or plan, typically an active voice, that compels the reader to act, advertise, market writing, instruction manuals, and business. These are the correspondence are all common source of transactional discourse. Transactional discourse class is used to propel something into action, like advertising, motivating a customer to buy, or showing a customer how to use a product by a manual. So in short, you're the one to explain about the use of the product or how it's good for you to use it, telling your customer to buy your goods because it have good qualities. More on this, transactional discourse are encouraging a customer to buy your product and showing them on what are the steps on how to use it. You also need to be sure or be clear on what you're advertising to make them buy your product. Some common sources of this are advertising, market writing, instruction manuals, and business correspondence. Most importantly, you should be active to get their attention and advertise your product. Poetic. Poetic discourse is a type of literary conversation which focuses on the expression of feelings, ideas, imaginations, events, and places through specific rhymes and rhythms. Poetic discourse makes use of common words in appealing way to present feelings and emotions. The mechanism of poetic discourse involves certain steps starting from different sources, then entering the mental process, mental realization, and then finally into a finished product as poetry. Expressive discourse. Expressive discourse is from the word express, means to show. Expressive discourse is a general term for writing or speech that focuses on the identity or the experience of the speaker. Expressive discourse comprises those acts of literary that is creative but non-fiction. Examples are memoirs, letters, and online blogs. And now, let us go on to our last discourse, academic discourse. First of all, what is the meaning of academic discourse? Academic discourse encompasses the idea of dialogue, the language used, and the format that facilitates a high level of communication in the classroom. Let us know the feature of academic discourse. This discourse can include anything from listening to debating, presentations to metacognition, and even writing to critiquing. But what important is that a student are able to process and interact with academic vocabulary. And now, let us know the difference between academic and literary discourse. Academic discourse encompasses the idea of dialogue, the language used, and the format that facilitates a high level of communication in the classroom, while literary discourse is a discourse or discourse for its pronunciation is another word for written or spoken communication. In literature, discourse refers to a presentation of thought through language. And now, class, that is the end of our lesson for today about discourse. Have a good day, everyone, and class dismissed.